This is a Chickering concert grand built in the year 1859. It is easily the oldest Chickering grand that we've had our hands on, and I wanted to give a little tour of it, if a tour of a piano makes any sense. Now, even though this is easily identifiable as a concert grand piano, it has quite a number of details to it that distinguish it dramatically from pianos made today and even pianos made just a little while after this. This is, for the era, a real technological tour de force, and for those familiar with Chickerings and pianos in general, I want to show some of the details of the piano that are notable. The first detail that I would draw your eye to is that the bass strings do not cross over the plain wires for your standard cross stringing. Steinway apparently started that in America in 1859, and coincidentally, this is the year this piano was made, so they are contemporaries. This company kept with the straight strung plan for another 25 years in some models. So the straight strung system was a developed, mature system, and the cross stringing, while possibly an improvement, doesn't mean that the techniques applied in these older straight strung instruments was ineffective. It's just a matter of, well, perhaps it's like looking at airplanes. You know, biplanes were not ineffective. They worked very well. They just had their day. And when it comes to a plane ride, I know I'd rather go up in a biplane myself. So these are not without their value. Anyhow, this is just a common feature of pianos of the era, and I want to go on to things that are really unique about this instrument. So the next detail I want to look at isn't really so much technological, though the plate itself as a single casting was a technological triumph of its time. And the holes are there for stress relief in the plate, so that there's no brittle points. But at this period, when you were proud of something, you embellished it. And apparently Chickering was very proud of this plate. I cannot find the picture, but I have seen these castings in their original, and they're not just painted over like this. They are painted in the most beautiful enamels. And I may go after this plate at some point with a little bit of thinner and see if I can't get this gold off without losing the painting underneath, because the leaves were beautiful, dark green, everything had 2 or 3 shades of its color, and the flowers were painted most realistically. I think these are, what, 2 different types of rose being depicted, but this type of embellishment fell by the wayside pretty quickly. Chickerings of this earlier period are often really difficult to work on because they followed an older European tradition of building up the case around the plate to a certain extent. And what that means is that this piece of wood is made up of 2 layers, and there's an inner layer that sits on top of the plate. So they put the plate into the case, and then they glue in an inner rim on top of it. And that would require you to take the veneer off the top of the rim, get that inner rim off, and then you'd be able to take the screws out and lift the plate out. Shy of that, you can't get the iron out, so you can't get to the soundboard to do anything meaningful to it. And this piano is the most extreme example of that I've ever seen, in that the bass strut is also built into the side of the case. In later pianos, that strut was simply pulled over to be run alongside the bass strings. But this is part of the one-piece cast iron case. Also reinforces the plate system. So I don't want to second guess how they did it, but it does box you in a little bit as far as what can be done without having to go all the way. So now here's what I really wanted to make the video of, because this is the detail in this piano that is deeply period. I've never seen an example of the system that Chickering used earlier than this. But this, I believe, is the string mounting system that he used from 1843 forward. And I'm not sure how far it went either, because Chickerings of this age are spotty and you have to investigate each one. So anyway, what we're looking at is a metal bead simply cast into the plate, and they've drilled holes to space the strings, to set them in a line and make the 3-string groupings. I've seen a few pictures of old originals, and I'm 52% confident that in their original form these holes were drilled through the plate and then they were bushed like a damper guide rail. And that allowed for smooth rendering. But as I said, I'm not sure what system they used before this. This would in time be replaced with 88 A-graphs. And I saw a picture of one, a 46B, and the A-graphs were very, very heavy, meaty, thick things. Basically the size and thickness of this bead broken up into brass chunks that were only slightly rounded and slightly thin. But this must have, at its inception, made for a very, very stable instrument. And they are let's see if I can find the okay, I'm up in the treble corner here, and there's the treble strut built into the side of the case again. There's the bead with the holes and the strings passing through. This right here is a strip of wood wrapped in pretty heavy woven cloth. The detail that I want to share that was a mystery to me, and I squinted at the book, or squinted at the patent pictures and could never quite get clear in my mind, was to whether there was a wooden pin block here or cast iron webbing like you would expect. It's not at all obvious to look at, but in the end there's cast iron webbing through here. It is a one piece, and it's not a 3/4 plate. It covers the face of the pins. I was not at all expecting this, because they left this system behind in the next iteration. We're working on a 33B that has a completely open pin block. This is wood up through here. These struts go over the top of it and into the case for reinforcement, but there is no iron webbing over the pin field itself. And you have to remember that this became standard in all pianos everywhere eventually. Why would they take it out? Baffled. We're all baffled. Is there any Chickering maniacs out there who can explain it to me, I would really be curious. But it's a detail that you can't tell in the pictures because they paint wood gold at that time too. So this is a conundrum for us. Always share a conundrum. So there you go. The other thing I'm really curious about in this piano is the action. I'm currently restoring a Brown action from 1867. This being 8 years earlier could be radically different. Chickering is always an adventure, so I am going to pull the action and see what it's like. Okay, this is the action out of the 1859 Chickering Concert Grand. It is, of course, a Brown action, standard for Chickerings of that day, named after its inventor Edwin Brown. It is an earlier version. It's got what I call a gracile version. It's a lighter version. These actions got much heavier later on. And if you look at my videos about the 33B action, this is not so very different. But it is not the same. Little details. The back checks are tiny. Much smaller than the ones in the action just, 8 years later? And even though the actions are really quite similar, the under thumb, or under hammer, has a shape unlike the one I'm working on now, making this yet, another variation on the Brown action. So that's at least 3 from this period I can point to, and there's a few varieties of the later robust ones. So this action was subject to constant experimentation and innovation, and it developed over the years. And I want to show you the most interesting thing in this is the damper system, which is absolutely unlike anything that's used today. I'll take a look at that real quick now. These are the damper lifter tabs on the 33B Brown action from 1867, just for comparison. It's a little hard to understand the damper system in this piano unless you can see what they're doing with the backs of the keys. Most pianos would have a little ledge here and have a little hunk of felt sitting there, and when the key went up, the little felt lever would lift the dampers. These don't work quite that way, and you need to see that they have taken and carved a tongue, or a notch rather, I suppose, into the back end of the key. And rather than slip under the damper control levers, they grab them. And that's quite interesting, and I'll show you why now. Okay, over here at the case again, Um, these are what they call the dampers, and they're just little blocks of wood on wire with pieces of felt that stop the vibration of the string. And when you look at them, they strike you as remarkably small. But, as I showed you on the backs of the keys, these don't just sit on the strings. Because the key is grabbing the tab, these can be adjusted so that the key actually pulls the felt nicely into the string with, frankly, more force than mere gravity could give it. So I think these dampers are actually quite effective despite their size. But the interesting part is down below. Okay, still inside the action cavity. These are the damper underlevers, and they sure look a lot like what you would expect from pretty much any grand piano. You have a stick of wood coming forward, a vertical abstract that the wire goes into, and a felted lip at the front if they are felted. And at first glance, it doesn't look all that different from what you'd find in any regular grand piano. The only problem is when you actuate the pedal, it lifts the back of the tray. The tray is hinged to the front here, and it has a forward pivot point here. So the whole tray moves up in the back. And you may notice that moving that does not raise the dampers. So pressing the pedal in this system does not raise the dampers. What it does do, however, is drop the tabs. And since the tabs are captured in the key, remember the key's got a tongue that goes back and grabs like this. When you stop the dampers from dropping, they do actually raise the dampers. So the key itself can raise the damper, and by holding onto the tab, the pedal can leverage up the dampers. I think this is a system that evolved in square grands. And it was gone by the 1868 version, but it is just, I suppose, another way to do it. And as I said, when the key comes down, and if it's grabbing this, that can really make your dampers very effective. I don't think this is a better system, but it does have at least one superior characteristic. Okay, taking a first quick look inside the case here. And one of the features of these old Chickerings is that there's usually a label on the base wall. Let's see if I can read this one. And I know that man. That is Asa Rugg. And I have come across his name into the mid-1860s. I think his name's in the Sophia Smith piano, so that's 1868. So he was either the cabinet maker or the, I would suspect, since I see his name so much, I think he's the inspection, what do they call that guy, the foreman of the department. So always nice original details. Well, no look at the action would be complete without a quick look at the action label. All these old Chickering Grands came with a couple of labels on them. One in the action and one on the side of the case. Let's see if I can get this to come into focus here. And it lists the piano as the action is, number 48, and I cannot make out the name. Offhand, I want to say Davis, but it just eludes me. But these are one of the historical details of these pianos. So there it is.